Jephthah and his vow. The days of the judges were marked by constant struggle. Israel had no king, and each person often did what was right in their own eyes. The cycle of disobedience, oppression, and deliverance repeated itself as the people turned away from God, only to cry out when enemies rose against them. Among the many judges whom God raised, one stood out for his unusual beginnings and his tragic vow. His name was Jephthah. Jephthah was a mighty warrior from Gilead, but his family background was stained by rejection. He was the son of Gilead, but his mother was a prostitute. Because of this, his half-brothers despised him. They drove him out of his father's house, declaring that he would have no inheritance with them. Cast aside and unwanted, Jephthah fled to the land of Tob, where a group of adventurers gathered around him. Though he had been rejected, his skill and courage as a leader could not be denied, and men willingly followed him. Time passed, and trouble once again came to Israel. The Ammonites crossed the borders and oppressed the people of Gilead. The elders of Gilead, desperate for someone to lead them in battle, remembered Jephthah the outcast. They went to Tob and pleaded with him to return and become their commander. At first, Jephthah rebuked them for turning to him only in desperation after having despised him. But the elders promised that if he led them to victory, he would become their head. Jephthah agreed, but only after securing their oath before the Lord at Mizpah. Before the battle, Jephthah sent messengers to the king of Ammon, seeking peace. He asked why they had attacked Israel. The king replied that the land between the Arnon and the Jabbok belonged to Ammon, and that Israel had stolen it when they came from Egypt. Jephthah answered with a detailed recounting of Israel's history. He explained that Israel had not taken land from Moab or Ammon, but only from the Amorites, who had attacked them first. He argued that the Lord, the God of Israel, had given them that territory, and therefore Ammon had no right to it. Still, the king of Ammon refused to listen. The Spirit of the Lord came upon Jephthah, filling him with power for the task ahead. But in his zeal and desperation for victory, Jephthah made a vow to the Lord. He promised that if God gave him success against the Ammonites, then whatever came out of the door of his house to meet him when he returned in triumph would be dedicated to the Lord, and he would offer it as a burnt offering. Strengthened by God, Jephthah led the army of Gilead into battle. The fight was fierce, but the Lord delivered the Ammonites into his hands. Jephthah devastated 20 towns from Aroer to the vicinity of Minnith and Abel-keramim. Israel was victorious, and the oppression of Ammon was broken. The people rejoiced, and Jephthah's name was lifted high among them. But the story took a tragic turn. As Jephthah returned home in triumph, his heart confident in victory, he was met by someone running out to greet him. To his horror, it was his only child, his daughter. She came out with timbrels and dancing, celebrating her father's return. Jephthah tore his clothes in anguish, crying out that she had brought him low, for he had opened his mouth to the Lord and could not take back his vow. His daughter, with grace and strength beyond her years, did not resist. She reminded him that since he had made a vow to the Lord, he must do to her as he had promised, for God had given him victory over his enemies. Yet she asked one request, that she be allowed to go into the hills with her friends for 2 months to weep, not because of death itself, but because she would never marry and bear children. Jephthah granted her request, and she went away with her companions to mourn. When she returned, Jephthah fulfilled his vow. The scriptures say that she never knew a man, and from then on it became a custom in Israel that the young women would go out each year to commemorate the daughter of Jephthah for 4 days. The story stands as a solemn reminder of the seriousness of vows made before God and of the tragic consequences of rash promises. Jephthah continued to serve as judge of Israel for 6 years. During that time, he also dealt with conflict from within. The men of Ephraim, angry that they had not been called to the battle against Ammon, confronted Jephthah with arrogance, threatening to burn his house over his head. Jephthah responded that he had indeed called them, but they had not come to help. The dispute escalated into civil war, and Gilead fought against Ephraim. In the end, the Gileadites struck down many Ephraimites, and Jephthah judged Israel until his death. He was buried in Gilead, leaving behind a legacy both of deliverance and of sorrow. The life of Jephthah reveals many layers of human weakness and divine power. On one hand, he was a man rejected by his family, despised for his origins, yet chosen by God to deliver his people. His rise from outcast to leader shows that God often works through those the world rejects. On the other hand, his tragic vow illustrates the danger of making hasty promises to God without wisdom or understanding. The lesson resounds across the ages. God is faithful to deliver his people, but he does not require rash bargains in exchange for his help. The victory of Israel came by his spirit, not because of Jephthah's vow. Yet Jephthah bound himself to an unnecessary tragedy by speaking without careful thought. The story urges all who read it to be mindful of their words before the Lord, to trust him without bargaining, and to understand that obedience and faith are better than sacrifice. Jephthah's daughter shines as a figure of courage and submission. Though innocent of her father's vow, she accepted its consequence with dignity, trusting in the justice of God. Her memory was honored by the women of Israel, who year after year remembered her sacrifice. In her, we see a reflection of devotion that transcends personal dreams for the sake of faithfulness. The story of Jephthah is not merely a tale of war and victory, but of human weakness, divine sovereignty, and the solemn weight of words spoken to God. It reminds every generation that God can use the least likely to accomplish his purposes, but also that reverence, wisdom, and faith must guide our relationship with him. From rejection to leadership, from victory to tragedy, the life of Jephthah stands as both an inspiration and a warning. He was a mighty warrior and a chosen judge, yet also a man marked by a decision that forever shadowed his triumph. In the end, the story directs our hearts to the God who delivers, and to the caution that faith without wisdom can lead to sorrow.